The steam from the late afternoon train still hung in the frozen December air when Jackson Irons first saw her, huddled on that wooden bench outside the Santa Rosa station, shaking so hard he could see it from across the platform. December in New Mexico territory could be cruel in 1883, and this particular evening seemed determined to prove it, the wind cutting through the high desert town like a sharpened blade. She wore only a thin cotton dress, faded blue and patched at the elbows, her arms wrapped tight around herself as she tried to become smaller, invisible perhaps, while her teeth chattered audibly even over the noise of departing passengers. Jackson had just finished loading cattle feed onto his wagon, ready to make the 2-hour ride back to his ranch outside town, when something about her stillness caught his attention. Most folks waiting at stations had purpose, movement, somewhere to go. This woman sat frozen, not from choice but from having no other option, her dark blonde hair escaping from a bun that had given up hours ago, her lips taking on a bluish tint that made his chest tighten with concern. He crossed the platform in long strides, his boots heavy on the wooden planks, and without a word, shrugged out of his sheepskin coat, the one his mother had given him before she passed 3 years back. The woman looked up sharply as he draped it over her shoulders, her eyes wide and startled, green as new grass and just as vulnerable. "Can't have you freezing to death on our station bench," he said, his voice rougher than he meant it to be. "Makes the town look inhospitable." She clutched the coat around her, and he watched the relief flood her features as the warmth began to sink in. Up close, he could see she was young, probably around 22 or 23, with a face that would have been pretty if it were not so gaunt, so marked by exhaustion and what looked like days without proper food or rest. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice hoarse. "I cannot accept this." "You will freeze yourself." "Got another jacket in the wagon," he lied smoothly. The cold did not bother him much anyway, or so he told himself as the wind immediately found its way through his shirt. "Name's Jackson Irons. Most folks call me Jack." She hesitated, her fingers tightening on the coat's edges. "Beatrice Vance. Most folks used to call me B back when there were folks to call me anything." The loneliness in those words hit him harder than the cold ever could. He glanced around the platform, now nearly empty as the train pulled away in a cloud of steam and smoke. "You waiting for someone?" Beatrice shook her head, and he saw her swallow hard. "No, no one's coming for me. I just had nowhere else to go, and the station master said I could not stay inside after hours. The next train does not come until tomorrow afternoon." Jackson made a decision then, one that would change both their lives, though neither knew it yet. "Cannot leave you out here all night. There's a boarding house 2 streets over, run by Mrs. Chen. Good woman, fair prices. Let me take you there, get you settled." "I do not have money for a boarding house," Beatrice said quietly, shame coloring her pale cheeks. "I do not have money for much of anything, if I am being honest." He crouched down so they were eye level, noting the way she did not flinch away, which told him something about her courage. "Then let me help. No strings attached, Miss Vance, just one person helping another on a cold night." "Why?" The question was direct, her green eyes searching his face for ulterior motives. "You do not know me." "Don't need to know someone to see they need help," Jackson replied. "My mama raised me to do right by people, especially when they are down on their luck. So what do you say, Mrs. Chen makes a stew that could wake the dead, and her rooms are clean and warm." Beatrice studied him for a long moment, and he let her look, let her take measure of him. He knew what she would see, a man of 26, whether worn and honest-faced, with brown hair that needed cutting and blue eyes that met hers without shifting away. Finally, she nodded. "All right. Thank you, Mr. Irons. I accept your kindness, though I do not know how I will ever repay it." "Call me Jack," he said, offering his hand to help her up. She took it, her fingers ice cold even through the coat, and he felt her legs nearly give out as she stood. Without thinking, he slipped an arm around her waist to steady her. "When did you last eat?" "Yesterday morning." "Maybe the morning before. I have lost track of time somewhat." The admission made his jaw clench. He guided her toward his wagon, noting how light she felt, how unsteady. Once he had her settled on the bench seat, he pulled a blanket from the back and tucked it around her legs. The coat she still wore swallowed her frame, and he wondered what circumstances had brought her to this point. As he climbed up beside her and took the reins, she spoke again, softer this time. "I came from Kansas. My father died 6 months ago, left debts I did not know about. The bank took our farm. My aunt in Albuquerque said I could come stay with her, but when I arrived yesterday, I found out she had passed away 3 weeks ago. Her neighbors did not know me, would not take me in. I used the last of my money to get here, thinking Santa Rosa might have work, might have something." She paused, her voice breaking slightly. "I was wrong to assume. I should have planned better." Jackson guided the horses down the main street, the storefronts mostly dark now as evening settled in. "You could not have known about your aunt. That is not a failure of planning, Miss Vance. That is just cruel luck." "B," she said. "If you are Jack, then I am B." He smiled at that, a real smile that warmed him more than any coat could. "All right, B. Let me get you fed and rested, and tomorrow we will figure out what comes next." Mrs. Chen's boarding house sat on a quiet corner, its windows glowing with lamplight and the smell of cooking drifting out into the cold air. The proprietor herself answered Jackson's knock, a small woman in her 50s with shrewd eyes that took in the situation immediately. She and her late husband had come to Santa Rosa 15 years ago, one of the few Chinese families in the territory, and she had earned respect through sheer determination and excellent hospitality. "Jackson Irons, you bringing me guests at dinner time," she said, but her tone was warm. Then she saw Beatrice and her expression shifted to concern. Come in, come in. You look half frozen, girl. Mrs. Chen, this is B. Vance. She needs a room for a few nights and a good meal if you have any to spare. Mrs. Chen ushered them inside, already calling for her daughter to bring hot tea and bread. "I have room, always have room. You come, sit by the fire." She looked at Jackson. "You staying for supper too? I made enough. If it is not too much trouble." "No trouble. You helped fix my roof last month, would not take payment. I owe you more than supper." She guided Beatrice to a chair near the large fireplace that dominated the main room. "You stay right there, warm yourself. Sarah is bringing tea." Beatrice sank into the chair, and Jackson saw her eyes close briefly, as if being warm and safe was almost too much to bear after however many days of neither. Sarah Chen, a young woman about Beatrice's age, appeared with a tray of tea and thick slices of bread with butter. She smiled kindly at the newcomer, asked no questions, and retreated to help her mother. Jackson sat across from Beatrice, watching color slowly return to her face as she sipped the hot tea and ate the bread with careful, deliberate bites, as if afraid it might vanish. Mrs. Chen bustled about, setting the dining table for supper, and within 20 minutes, they were all seated around the table, bowls of thick beef stew, fresh biscuits, and roasted vegetables spread before them. Beatrice ate slowly, clearly trying not to appear desperate, but Jackson saw the way her hands trembled slightly as she brought the spoon to her lips, the way she savored every bite. Mrs. Chen kept the conversation light, talking about town gossip and weather predictions, giving Beatrice space to simply exist without having to explain herself. After supper, Mrs. Chen showed Beatrice to a small room on the second floor, clean and simple with a narrow bed covered in quilts, a washstand, and a window that looked out over the street. Jackson waited downstairs, settling the payment for a week's stay, despite Mrs. Chen's protests. "She needs time to recover, find her footing," he explained, pressing the coins into her hand. "And I know you run a business, not a charity." "You have a good heart, Jackson Irons," Mrs. Chen said, studying him with those shrewd eyes. "This girl, she is special to you." "Just met her an hour ago," he replied honestly. "But no one should be that cold and hungry, not when folks can help." Mrs. Chen pocketed the coins. "You come back tomorrow, check on her. I think maybe you want to." He did not deny it, just nodded and collected his hat. Upstairs, he heard water being poured, Mrs. Chen or Sarah helping Beatrice wash and prepare for bed. He let himself out into the cold night, climbed onto his wagon, and started the long ride home. The stars were brilliant overhead, the kind of clear, cold night that made the heavens look close enough to touch. As his horses plodded along the familiar road, Jackson found his thoughts returning again and again to green eyes and a grateful smile, to the weight of Beatrice's frail body against his side, to the question of what exactly he was doing. He had a ranch to run, 1,200 acres of scrubland and canyon that his father had claimed and built up over 30 years. Since his parents had both passed, Jackson had run it alone, with help from 3 ranch hands who lived in the bunkhouse. It was a hard life, a lonely one sometimes, though he rarely admitted that even to himself. At 26, he supposed he should be thinking about marriage, about building a family, but the right woman had never crossed his path. Until tonight, a small voice in his head whispered, and he shook his head at his own foolishness. The woman was desperate, alone, and vulnerable. The last thing she needed was some cowboy developing feelings just because he had played the hero for an evening. Still, as he finally reached his ranch house and settled the horses for the night, he knew he would ride back into town tomorrow, just to check on her, make sure she was recovering. That was all. Nothing more complicated than simple human decency. He almost believed it. Beatrice woke in the small room at Mrs. Chen's boarding house with weak sunlight streaming through the window and, for a brief, disoriented moment, could not remember where she was. Then it came back. The freezing bench, the kind cowboy with the warm coat, the miracle of hot food and a clean bed. She sat up slowly, her body aching from exhaustion and days of rough travel, but for the first time in weeks, she felt almost human again. Someone had laid out a clean dress on the chair, simple brown calico but well-made and warm. A note in neat handwriting read, "Thought you might need this." "It was my daughter's. She would want you to have it. Mrs. Chen." Tears pricked Beatrice's eyes at the kindness. She dressed quickly, finding the dress fit reasonably well if a bit loose in the waist, and made her way downstairs. The smell of coffee and frying bacon drew her to the kitchen, where Mrs. Chen stood at the stove and Sarah was setting the table. "Good morning," Beatrice said softly. "Thank you for the dress and for everything." "You are welcome. Sit, eat. You need strength, Mrs." Chen placed a plate before her, loaded with eggs, bacon, and fried potatoes. "Jackson already came by this morning before dawn. Left money for your room for your meals. Said you are not to worry about anything except getting well." Beatrice felt her chest tighten. "He already paid last night, did he not?" "He did. This morning he paid more, said to make sure you have what you need." Mrs. Chen sat down across from her with her own coffee. "He is a good man. Lost his parents young, runs that ranch all alone. Works hard, never complains. Whole town respects him." "I cannot let him keep paying for me," Beatrice protested. "It is too much. I need to find work, need to support myself." Sarah spoke up, her voice gentle. What kind of work can you do? I can cook, clean, so keep accounts. I ran my father's household after my mother died when I was 16. I can work hard, learn quickly. Beatrice heard the desperation creeping into her voice and tried to tamp it down. I am not looking for charity. I want to earn my way. There might be work at the hotel, Mrs. Chen mused, or the general store, Mrs. Patterson mentioned needing help with her children, maybe teaching them. You can read and write. Yes, and do figures. My father insisted I have proper schooling. Good, finish your breakfast, then we go talk to people. Santa Rosa is small, but folks help each other. We find you something. True to her word, Mrs. Chen took Beatrice around town that morning, introducing her to shopkeepers and business owners. It was strange, being in a new place, having to prove herself to strangers. But everyone Mrs. Chen spoke to treated Beatrice with courtesy and consideration. The problem was simple. Santa Rosa did not have much work available, especially not for a single woman with no connections and no references from anyone local. They were leaving the general store, Beatrice trying not to feel discouraged after another polite rejection when a familiar voice called out, "Morning, Mrs. Chen." Beatrice turned to see Jackson riding up on a beautiful sorrel horse, his coat, the one he had given her last night, back on his shoulders. He dismounted with easy grace and tipped his hat to both women. "Mr. Irons," Beatrice said, feeling her face warm despite the cold air. In daylight, she could see him more clearly, tall and lean with strong features and a quiet confidence in the way he carried himself. "I wanted to thank you again for everything. Mrs. Chen told me you came by this morning. Wanted to make sure you were all right," he said simply. "You have more color in your face today. That is good to see." Mrs. Chen, with the subtlety of a woman who knew exactly what she was doing, announced she needed to speak with the butcher and disappeared into the shop next door, leaving Beatrice and Jackson standing on the boardwalk. "Mrs. Chen has been helping me look for work," Beatrice explained, feeling the need to fill the silence. "I cannot continue accepting your generosity without earning my own way, Mr. Irons." "Jack," he corrected gently. "And there is no rush, B. Take time to recover your strength." "I am recovered enough. I am not fragile despite appearances last night." She lifted her chin, meeting his eyes. "I am stronger than I look and I am willing to work hard. I just need someone to give me a chance." Jackson was quiet for a moment, studying her with those steady blue eyes, and she resisted the urge to fidget under his gaze. Finally, he spoke. "I might have something if you are interested. My ranch house is in desperate need of help. I have been trying to manage cooking and cleaning around the ranch work and I am failing at both. I could use a housekeeper, someone to manage the house, cook for me and my ranch hands, maybe keep the books straight. I can offer room and board plus wages. It is hard work, but honest work." Beatrice's heart leaped, then immediately doubt crept in. "You do not know if I am any good at those things. You would hire me just on my word. Mrs. Chen vouches for you, and I trust her judgment. And I saw your character last night, the way you held yourself together despite everything." He shifted his weight, looking almost uncertain for the first time. "I will be straight with you, B. It is not entirely proper, a single woman living on a ranch with men. There would be talk. But the main house is separate from the bunkhouse where my hands stay, and I give you my word you would be safe and respected. If you want, Mrs. Chen could come out once a week, keep things appropriate. But I understand if you would rather find something else." Beatrice thought fast. Work was work, and beggars could not be choosers. More than that, she trusted Jackson Irons in a way she could not fully explain. He had helped her when she was at her lowest, asking nothing in return. That spoke to character. "I accept," she said firmly. "When would you like me to start?" "Tomorrow." That gives you another night to rest up, and I can prepare the house some, make sure the room is suitable. Tomorrow is perfect." Mrs. Chen returned then, her timing suspiciously convenient, and Jackson explained the arrangement. The older woman nodded approvingly. "I will come visit every Saturday, make sure everything is proper. And Beatrice, you have any problems, any at all, you send word to me immediately." "I will. Thank you, Mrs. Chen, for everything." They settled the details. Jackson would collect Beatrice after breakfast the next morning. He would pay her $20 a month plus room and board, which was more than generous for the territory. As he rode away, Beatrice felt hope kindle in her chest for the first time since her father had died. Maybe, just maybe, things were going to be all right. That evening, Sarah Chen helped Beatrice mend and wash her own dress, the thin blue one she had arrived in, and Mrs. Chen gave her a sturdy winter coat that had belonged to her late husband, altered to fit. "You will need this at the ranch," she said. "Gets cold out there." Beatrice worked on the coat herself, her stitches neat and even, and Mrs. Chen watched approvingly. "You do good work. Jackson is lucky to have found you." "I am the lucky one," Beatrice replied. "Without his help, I do not know what would have become of me." "He is a good man, but lonely," Mrs. Chen said thoughtfully. "Since his parents died, he works too hard, never takes time for himself. Maybe having someone in that house will be good for him too." Beatrice did not respond, but she thought about Jackson's quiet kindness, the way he had given her his coat without hesitation, the respect in his eyes when he looked at her. She had known cruel men and indifferent men in her life. Jackson Irons seemed to be neither, and that alone made him remarkable. The next morning arrived clear and cold. Beatrice, dressed in her mended blue dress with the warm coat over it, packed her few belongings in a bundle and said goodbye to Mrs. Chen and Sarah. "You remember what I said," Mrs. Chen told her. "Any problems, you send word." "I will, thank you for everything." Jackson arrived promptly after breakfast, his wagon loaded with supplies from town. He helped Beatrice up onto the bench seat, his hands steady and respectful, and they set off into the desert landscape. The ride took nearly 2 hours, following a rough road that wound through scrubland dotted with pinon and juniper. Jackson pointed out landmarks, a distinctive rock formation, the dry creek bed that ran full during spring runoff, the boundary markers of his land. He talked easily, filling her in on the ranch's history. "My father came out here in 1855, he explained. "He was from Texas originally, wanted land of his own, built the ranch up from nothing, ran cattle and some horses. When he married my mother, she helped make it prosper. They worked hard, made a good life." His voice softened. "They died within 6 months of each other 3 years back. Fever took them both. Since then, it has been just me and the hands keeping things running." "I am sorry for your loss," Beatrice said quietly. "I know what it is to lose parents. My mother died of consumption when I was 16. My father was never quite the same after. I think his heart was broken, and it just took years for the rest of him to follow." Jackson glanced at her, and she saw understanding in his eyes. "Grief is a heavy thing to carry." "Yes, but work helps. Having purpose helps." "It does," he agreed. They rode in companionable silence for a while, and Beatrice found herself studying the landscape. It was harsh and beautiful in equal measure, all tawny earth and distant blue mountains, the sky impossibly wide overhead. So different from the green farmland of Kansas, yet there was something appealing about its stark honesty. Finally, they crested a rise and Jackson pointed. "There, that is home." Beatrice looked down into a shallow valley where a cluster of buildings sat near a canyon wall. The main house was adobe, larger than she had expected, with a covered porch and real glass windows. Nearby stood a barn, a bunkhouse, several corrals, and various outbuildings. Cattle grazed in the distance, dark shapes against the pale earth, and she could see a windmill turning slowly in the breeze. "It is bigger than I imagined," she said. "About 1,200 acres total, though most of it is open range. We run about 300 head of cattle, couple dozen horses. It is a decent operation." He sounded neither boastful nor apologetic, just stating facts. As they descended into the valley, 3 men emerged from the barn, watching the wagon approach. Jackson waved to them and pulled up in front of the main house. "These are my ranch hands. That is Miguel, been here since my father's time. Next to him is Tom, and the young one is Danny. Fellows, this is Miss Beatrice Vance. She is our new housekeeper, so I expect you all to treat her with respect." The 3 men nodded and offered polite greetings. Miguel, a weathered man in his 50s with silver-threaded black hair, smiled warmly. "Welcome, Miss Vance. It is good to have someone who can cook. We have been suffering under Jackson's attempts for too long." Tom and Danny laughed at that, and Jackson shook his head ruefully. "They are not wrong. Come on, Bee, let me show you the house." He helped her down from the wagon and led her up onto the porch. The house was solid and well built, if clearly in need of a woman's touch. Inside, the main room served as kitchen and living area, with a large fireplace, a scarred wooden table, and cupboards along one wall. Doors led off to other rooms. 3 bedrooms, Jackson explained, showing her around. "My parents had the largest one, but I took the smaller room after they passed. Could not bring myself to sleep in their bed, so the big room is yours now if you want it. There is also a small office where I keep the ranch books and a storeroom." The bedroom he showed her was indeed spacious, with a real bed frame and mattress, a wardrobe, a washstand with a mirror, and a window overlooking the canyon. It was dusty and clearly unused, but it was more than Beatrice had dared hope for. "This is wonderful," she said honestly. "Thank you, Jack." "Make it your own," he said. "There are linens in the storeroom, and if you need anything else, just say so. I will leave you to settle in, and maybe later you can take stock of the kitchen, see what supplies we need." He left her then, heading out to work with his men, and Beatrice stood in the center of the bedroom, taking in the reality of her new situation. She had a home, at least for now. She had work and wages and a chance to rebuild her life. The gratitude that washed over her was so intense it nearly brought her to her knees, but she was not the type to stand around feeling emotional when there was work to be done. She found linens, aired out the mattress, made up the bed with crisp sheets and wool blankets. She swept and dusted, washed the windows until they gleamed, and arranged her few belongings in the wardrobe. By the time she finished, the room looked almost cozy. Then she tackled the kitchen. It was not as bad as she had feared. The basic supplies were there, just disorganized and dusty. She found flour and cornmeal, salt and lard, dried beans and beef, onions and potatoes in a root cellar, enough to make a decent meal. She built up the fire in the stove, set water to boil, and started preparing dinner. When the men came in at dusk, drawn by the smell of cooking food, they found the table set, the kitchen clean, and Beatrice pulling fresh biscuits from the oven to go with the beef stew and fried potatoes she had made. "Lord above," Danny breathed, the youngest of the hands at maybe 20 years old. "Is that real food?" "Sit down, all of you," Beatrice said, feeling a flutter of nervousness. This was her first real test. "I hope it is to your liking." They sat, and she served them, watching anxiously as they took first bites. The silence that followed was broken by Miguel's heartfelt sigh. "Miss Vance, if you never do anything else, you have already earned your wages. This is magnificent." The others agreed enthusiastically, and Beatrice felt herself relax. Jackson caught her eye across the table and smiled, a real smile that made his whole face change. made him look younger and warmer and impossibly handsome. Her heart did a strange little skip that she firmly ignored. After dinner, the ranch hands retreated to the bunkhouse, and Jackson helped Beatrice clean up despite her protests. "You cooked, I clean. That is only fair," he said, rolling up his sleeves and heating water for washing. They worked side by side in companionable silence, and Beatrice found herself acutely aware of his presence. The way he moved with quiet efficiency, the strength in his hands as he dried the heavy pots, the smell of leather and sage that seemed to cling to him. "Tomorrow I will show you the books," he said as they finished. "They are a mess, I am afraid. Numbers are not my strong suit." "I am good with figures," Beatrice assured him. "My father taught me to keep his farm accounts. I will have them sorted in no time." "I believe you." He hung up the dish towel and turned to face her. "B, I want you to know you are not just hired help here. You are welcome to consider this place home for as long as you need or want. And if anything or anyone makes you uncomfortable, you tell me immediately. That includes me." The earnestness in his voice, the clear respect, made her throat tight. "You have been nothing but kind, Jack. I am grateful for this chance." "You are giving me a chance too," he said. "A chance to have a real home again, not just a place to sleep between work. So I suppose we are helping each other." After he left, heading to his own room, Beatrice prepared for bed in her new space. As she lay beneath the clean quilts, listening to the unfamiliar sounds of the ranch settling for the night, she thought about Jackson Irons and the unexpected turn her life had taken. She had come to New Mexico territory with nothing, desperate and alone, and somehow she had found this. A place, a purpose, and a man whose quiet strength made her feel safe for the first time in months. It was too soon to call it anything more than gratitude, she told herself firmly. Too soon to examine the warmth that spread through her chest when he smiled, or the way her heart beat faster when their hands accidentally brushed passing a dish. She was his housekeeper and he was her employer, and that was all it could be. But as sleep claimed her, her dreams were filled with blue eyes and gentle hands, and the feeling of being wrapped in a warm coat that smelled like home. The first weeks passed in a blur of work and routine. Beatrice rose before dawn to make breakfast for the men, packed lunches for them to take out on the range, spent her days cleaning and organizing the long, neglected house, cooking elaborate dinners that made the ranch hands look at her with something approaching worship. In the evenings, after everything was clean, she sat with Jackson in the office and worked through the ranch accounts. He had not been exaggerating about the mess. Bills were unpaid, receipts were missing, and the ledger had not been properly balanced in at least a year. But Beatrice found she enjoyed the puzzle of it, tracking down discrepancies and organizing everything into neat columns. Within 2 weeks, she had the books current and could tell Jackson exactly where the ranch stood financially. "We are doing better than I thought," he said, studying her neat figures. "You have a real talent for this, B." "It is just organization and attention to detail," she demurred, but she felt pleased nonetheless. They fell into an easy partnership. Jackson consulted her on household purchases, and she began to consult him on improving efficiency. She suggested buying in bulk from Santa Rosa to save money, and he arranged for monthly supply runs. She noticed the bunkhouse roof was leaking and mentioned it, and he had it repaired before the next rain. Small things, but they added up to a smoothly running operation. More than that, they talked. In the evenings after the hands had gone to the bunkhouse and the house was quiet, Jackson would often linger at the kitchen table with a cup of coffee, and they would discuss everything from ranch business to books they had read to childhood memories. Beatrice learned that he had wanted to be a teacher when he was young, but duty to the ranch had taken precedence. He learned that she had once dreamed of opening a dress shop, creating beautiful things with her skilled hands. "Maybe you still could," he said one evening. "There is no law saying you have to stay a housekeeper forever." "I like being a housekeeper," she replied honestly. "At least, I like being this housekeeper in this house." She looked around the kitchen, which she had transformed with curtains she had sewn, with herbs growing in pots on the windowsill, with the warmth and care she had poured into every corner. "I have not felt this settled since before my mother died. This feels like home." Something shifted in Jackson's expression, something warm and tender that made her pulse quicken. "I am glad," he said softly. "It feels like home to me again, too, since you came." They looked at each other across the table, and the air seemed to thicken with unspoken words, with possibilities neither was quite ready to name. Then Jackson cleared his throat and stood, breaking the moment. "I should let you rest. Tomorrow is Saturday. Mrs. Chen is coming for her visit." "Yes, of course. Good night, Jack." "Good night, B." Mrs. Chen's weekly visits had become a comfortable routine. The older woman would arrive mid-morning, inspect the house with a critical eye that always found it spotless, have lunch with Beatrice, and gather any gossip to take back to town. On this particular Saturday in late January, she brought news that made Beatrice's heart sink. "That man is in town," Mrs. Chen said as they washed lunch dishes. "The one asking about you." Beatrice's hand stilled in the soapy water. "What man?" "He came to my boarding house 3 days ago. Said his name was Curtis Vance, claimed to be your cousin. Said your father owed him money and the debt passed to you. He is looking for you." The dish Beatrice was holding slipped from her fingers and clattered into the basin. Curtis Vance. Her father's nephew, a cruel man who had been sniffing around the farm before her father died, making veiled threats about family obligations and debts. She had hoped, that leaving Kansas would mean leaving him behind. "What did you tell him?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "Nothing. I said I had not heard the name Beatrice Vance. He did not believe me, I could tell, but he could not prove otherwise. Sarah confirmed my story." Mrs. Chen touched Beatrice's arm gently. "Is this man dangerous? I do not know. Maybe. He was always volatile, always angry about something. He claimed my father borrowed money from his father years ago, but I never saw any proof, and my father never mentioned it. After father died, Curtis appeared saying I owed him $500, but the bank had already taken everything for their debts. There was nothing left to give him." "And you think he followed you here?" "I do not know how else he would know where I went. I told no one in Kansas where I was going." Beatrice felt panic rising in her chest. "Mrs. Chen, I cannot let him find me. If he thinks I have money now, if he knows I have employment, he will not stop until he gets what he thinks he is owed. Then we do not let him find you." Mrs. Chen's voice was firm. "Santa Rosa is small, but we protect our own. I will spread the word quietly. If anyone asks about you, they know nothing. But Beatrice, you must tell Jackson. He deserves to know there may be trouble." Beatrice nodded miserably. The thought of bringing her problems to Jackson's door after everything he had already done for her made her feel sick. But Mrs. Chen was right. He needed to know. That evening, after the hands had gone to bed and the house was quiet, Beatrice found the courage to tell Jackson everything. He listened without interrupting, his face growing increasingly serious. "You think this Curtis might come here?" he asked when she finished. "I do not know, maybe, if he is determined enough." She twisted her hands in her apron. "Jack, I am so sorry. I never meant to bring trouble to your home. If you want me to leave, I understand." "Leave?" He looked at her as if she had suggested setting the house on fire. "B, you are not going anywhere. If this man comes looking for you, we will deal with it together." "But I might be putting you in danger." "Curtis, He has a temper, and he does not let things go easily." Jackson stood and crossed to where she sat, crouching down so they were eye level. "Listen to me. You are under my protection now. That means something out here. If this Curtis shows up, he will find out real quick that he cannot bully you or threaten you. I will not allow it." The fierce protectiveness in his voice sent a shiver through her that had nothing to do with fear. "You have already done so much for me, and I would do more if you needed it." His hand reached out, hesitated, then gently covered hers. "B, you have become important to me, more important than maybe you realize. The thought of someone hurting you or scaring you makes me want to, makes me want to do violence, and I am not generally a violent man." Her breath caught. "Jack, I know this is not the time, and I know I am probably overstepping, but I need you to understand. You are not alone anymore. Whatever comes, we face it together." Beatrice looked into his eyes, those steady blue eyes that had offered her kindness when she had nothing, and felt something crack open in her chest, something she had kept locked away since her father died. Trust, maybe, or hope. Or something deeper, something that felt dangerously like love. "Together," she whispered, and his hand tightened on hers. They sat there in the lamplight, hands clasped, and Beatrice felt the fear that had been choking her loosen its grip. Whatever happened with Curtis, she was not facing it alone. She had Jackson, and somehow that made all the difference. Curtis Vance arrived at the ranch on a cold Tuesday morning in early February. Beatrice was kneading bread dough when she heard the sound of an unfamiliar horse, and she looked out the window to see a stocky man in a city suit dismounting near the barn. Even from a distance, she recognized her cousin's distinctive swagger, the way he carried himself like the world owed him something. Fear flooded through her, but she forced herself to stay calm. Jackson was out on the range with Tom and Danny, but Miguel was in the barn. She quickly wiped her hands and stepped out onto the porch, not wanting Curtis to enter the house. "Cousin Beatrice," Curtis called, his voice oily with false friendliness. "What a pleasure to finally find you. You have led me on quite a chase. Curtis, what do you want?" She kept her voice steady, her hands still. "Is that any way to greet family? I have come all this way to see you, and that is the welcome I get." He approached the porch, and she saw his eyes cataloging everything. The well-maintained house, the thriving ranch, the signs of prosperity. "You have done well for yourself. Found yourself a rich rancher to take care of you, have you?" "I work for my living," she said coldly. "What do you want, Curtis?" His false friendliness dropped away. "The money your father owed my father, $500 plus interest. Call it 600 now for my trouble in tracking you down. My father owed your father nothing. You have no proof of any debt. I have a signed note right here." He patted his jacket pocket. "All legal and proper, and you, as his heir, are responsible for paying it. The bank took everything for their debts. There is nothing left. But you have a job now, do you not? I am sure your employer would be willing to advance you the money, or maybe I should speak to him directly. Maybe he does not know what kind of woman he has taken in, a woman who does not pay her debts." Miguel emerged from the barn then, his hand resting casually on the revolver at his hip. "Miss Vance, is there a problem?" Curtis looked at the ranch hand with irritation. "This is a private family matter. Anything concerning Miss Vance is ranch business," Miguel said calmly. "And you are on ranch property. State your business or leave." Before Curtis could respond, the sound of approaching horses drew everyone's attention. Jackson rode in with Tom and Danny, and Beatrice saw him take in the scene instantly. Her defensive posture on the porch, Curtis's aggressive stance, Miguel's hand on his gun. He dismounted in one smooth motion and crossed to the porch. "Can I help you? You the owner?" Curtis demanded. "I am." "Jackson Irons, and you are Curtis Vance. I am here to collect a debt from my cousin." He gestured to Beatrice. $600 her father owed mine. Jackson looked at Beatrice and she shook her head slightly. He turned back to Curtis, his expression neutral but his voice carrying an edge of steel. "Miss Vance is in my employ and under my protection. If you have a legitimate claim, present your evidence to the territorial court. Otherwise, I suggest you leave." "I have a signed note," Curtis insisted, pulling a folded paper from his pocket. "Right here, see. Dated 1879. Orson Vance borrowed $500 from my father to be repaid with interest." Jackson took the paper and studied it, his jaw tightening. Beatrice felt her heart sink. If the note was real, if her father really had borrowed money, then legally she might be responsible. "This signature," Jackson said slowly, "does not look much like Orson Vance's hand. I have seen his signature on the letter B carries, the one he wrote her before he died. The writing is different. Are you calling me a forger?" Curtis's face flushed red. "I am saying this note needs to be verified before any debt can be collected, which means court, like I said." Jackson handed the paper back. "Now, I have been polite, but my patience is wearing thin. You have 1 minute to get on your horse and leave my property, or I will have you removed." Curtis's eyes narrowed dangerously. "You think you can threaten me? I know the law, Irons. I can make trouble for you for this whole ranch, harboring a debtor, interfering with legal collection of funds." "And I know territorial law too," Jackson replied, his voice deadly calm, "which says a man on my property who refuses to leave after being told is trespassing, and I am within my rights to defend my property. Tom, Danny, Miguel, help Mr. Vance find his way to the property line." The 3 ranch hands moved forward, and Curtis took a step back, his bluster fading into calculation. "This is not over. I will be back with the law, and then we will see how protective you feel. You do that, but you come onto my land again without an invitation, and it will not go well for you." Curtis mounted his horse, shooting venomous looks at both Beatrice and Jackson. "This is not over, cousin. You owe me, and I will collect one way or another." He rode off, and Beatrice felt her knees go weak. Jackson was beside her in an instant, his hand on her elbow to steady her. "Come inside," he said gently. "Miguel, keep an eye out in case he doubles back. Tom, Danny, back to work." In the kitchen, Jackson guided Beatrice to a chair and poured her water from the pitcher. She drank gratefully, her hands trembling. "I am sorry," she whispered. "I should have known he would find me. I should have warned you sooner." "You warned me when Mrs. Chen told you he was in town. That was soon enough." Jackson pulled out the chair next to her and sat down. That note he showed me, I do not think it is real." The signature looked wrong, and the paper was too new, not 4 years old like it should be. "I think he forged it, hoping to scare you into paying." "But what if it is real? What if my father really did borrow money and never told me? Then we will deal with it through proper legal channels, and if a debt is legitimately owed, we will find a way to pay it. But I do not think that is what is happening here. I think your cousin is trying to cheat you." Beatrice wanted to believe him, but doubt gnawed at her. Her father had been a good man, but he had also been terrible with money, especially after her mother died. It was possible he had borrowed and forgotten, or been too ashamed to tell her. "What do we do now?" she asked. "Now we wait and see if he goes to the authorities. If he does, we will present our side. If he does not, then we know he was bluffing." Jackson reached over and took her hand. "Either way, you are not facing this alone. I meant what I said, B. You are under my protection." She looked at their joined hands, his so much larger than hers, calloused from work but gentle in their touch. "Why are you doing all this for me, Jack? You could have sent me away the moment trouble appeared. Most men would have." "Because you matter to me," he said simply. "Because I cannot imagine this house without you in it. Because when I think about my future, you are in it if you want to be." Her heart stuttered. "Jack, I do not have anything to offer you. I am just a housekeeper with nothing to my name and a cousin who might be able to make legal claims against me. You have everything to offer. You have brought life back to this ranch to me, and I do not care about money or debts or any of that. I care about you, B. I think I started caring that first night when you looked at me with those green eyes and thanked me for a coat, like it was the most precious gift anyone had ever given you." Tears spilled down Beatrice's cheeks, but they were not tears of fear or sadness. "I thought it was. No one had been kind to me in so long, and then there you were, this stranger offering help without expecting anything in return. I think I started falling for you that night, though I did not let myself admit it. And now—" His thumb brushed across her knuckles, sending shivers up her arm. "Now I know I love you," she said, the words coming out in a rush. "I love the way you care for your ranch hands like family, the way you talk about your parents with such respect and affection, the way you gave me a chance when I had nothing. I love your honesty and your strength, and the way you look at me like I am precious. I love you, Jackson Irons, and I am terrified because I have nothing to give you in return. You give me everything just by being here." He stood, drawing her up with him, and cupped her face in his hands. "Beatrice Vance, I love you. I want to build a life with you, face whatever comes together. Will you let me?" Instead of answering with words, she rose on her toes and kissed him, her first kiss, awkward and perfect and filled with all the emotion she could not express. He responded gently, one hand sliding to the small of her back to pull her closer, the other still cradling her face like she was something breakable and precious. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Jackson rested his forehead against hers. "Is that a yes?" "That is a yes," she confirmed and kissed him again. They stood there in the kitchen, wrapped in each other's arms, and for a moment the world outside with its threats and uncertainties fell away. There was only this, the two of them together, and the love that had grown from a simple act of kindness on a cold December night. But reality could not be held off forever. Curtis Vance did not go to the authorities, at least not immediately, but he did not disappear either. Word came through Mrs. Chen that he was still in Santa Rosa, making inquiries, talking to anyone who would listen about his ungrateful cousin who owed him money. The town, to its credit, remained largely unhelpful to him, Mrs. Chen's network of friends and allies closing ranks around one of their own. Still, his presence was a dark cloud on the horizon, and Jackson decided to take action. He rode into Santa Rosa and consulted with the territorial judge, a stern man named Henderson who had been administering justice in New Mexico for 20 years. "Bring me any documentation you have," Judge Henderson said after hearing the story. "Letters from her father, anything that shows his signature. I will compare it to this note your friend claims to have. If it is a forgery, I can issue a warrant for fraud." Jackson returned to the ranch with a plan, and Beatrice dug through her belongings to find the few letters her father had written her over the years. There were not many. Orson Vance had not been much for writing, but each one was carefully preserved. She handed them to Jackson with trembling hands. "These are all I have left of him," she said softly. "I will guard them with my life," Jackson promised, and he meant it. He took the letters back to Judge Henderson, who studied them carefully, comparing the handwriting to a copy of Curtis's note that Jackson had sketched from memory. After an hour, the judge sat back with a grunt. "It is a forgery, clear as day. The hand is similar but not identical, and there are tells, the way he forms his letters, that are all wrong. This Curtis Vance is trying to perpetrate a fraud." He wrote something on official letterhead and handed it to Jackson. "This is a court order. If Curtis Vance approaches Miss Vance again with this fraudulent claim, he can be arrested. I am also sending word to the sheriff to keep an eye on him." Jackson felt relief wash through him. "Thank you, Judge Henderson." "Thank Mrs. Chen," the judge replied with a slight smile. "She came to see me yesterday, made it very clear that Miss Vance is under the town's protection. I may be the law, but Mrs. Chen runs this territory in ways I never could. Besides, I do not take kindly to men who forge documents and try to cheat young women out of money they do not have. Justice should protect the vulnerable, not prey on them." Armed with the court order, Jackson returned to the ranch and showed Beatrice the document. She read it twice, then a third time as if unable to believe the words. "It is really over?" she asked. "If Curtis is smart, it is. If he is not, he will end up in jail." Jackson pulled her into his arms, feeling her relax against him. "You are safe, Bea. He cannot touch you now." She buried her face in his chest, and he felt her shoulders shake with what might have been sobs or laughter or both. He held her through it, stroking her hair and murmuring reassurances, marveling at how completely this woman had woven herself into his heart in just 2 short months. That evening they told the ranch hands the good news over dinner, and Miguel raised his glass of water in a toast. "To Miss Vance and to justice." "To Miss Vance," the others echoed, and Beatrice blushed but smiled. Later, after everyone had gone to bed, Jackson and Beatrice sat on the porch wrapped in blankets, watching the stars wheel overhead in the clear desert sky. The cold was bitter, but pressed together they generated enough warmth to keep comfortable. "I have been thinking," Jackson said slowly, "about the future, about what comes next." "What do you mean?" "I mean, I love you and you love me, and it seems foolish to keep pretending this is just an employer and employee situation." He took a breath. "I want to marry you, Bea. I want you to be my wife, my partner in all things. I know it is soon, I know people will talk, but I do not care. When something is right, you know it." Beatrice turned to look at him, her eyes shining in the starlight. "Are you proposing to me, Jackson Irons?" "I suppose I am. Though I am making a mess of it, I do not have a ring, I did not plan this. I just know that I want to spend my life with you, and I do not want to wait." He took her hand. "Beatrice Vance, will you marry me?" "Yes," she said, no hesitation, no doubt. "Yes, I will marry you. I cannot think of anything I want more." He kissed her then, long and deep, pouring all his love and commitment into the embrace. When they finally broke apart, both were breathless and grinning. "We should do it soon," Beatrice said. "I do not want to give anyone a chance to object or cause trouble, and I want to be your wife, Jack. I want that security, that bond." "Next week, then. We will go to Santa Rosa, talk to the minister, make it official." He pulled her closer. "And then you will be Mrs. Jackson Irons, and no one can question your place here." "Mrs. Jackson Irons," she repeated, testing the name. "I like how that sounds." They sat there until the cold became too much, then retreated inside to their separate rooms, though Jackson found himself wishing, not for the first time, that propriety did not require the separation. Soon, he told himself. Soon she would be his wife, and they would share a bed and a life, and he would wake up every morning with her beside him. The thought filled him with a happiness so intense it was almost painful. The week passed in a flurry of preparation. Mrs. Chen, when told of the impending wedding, threw herself into planning with the fervor of a general organizing a military campaign. She insisted on making Beatrice a proper wedding dress, enlisting Sarah's help to sew a beautiful gown of cream-colored silk that had been stored away for years. "My wedding dress," Mrs. Chen explained as they fitted the fabric to Beatrice's slim frame. "I always hoped Sarah would wear it, but she is too tall. You, though, you are perfect size." "I cannot take your wedding dress," Beatrice protested, overwhelmed by the generosity. "You can and you will." It makes me happy to see it used again, to see love celebrated." Mrs. Chen's eyes grew distant. "My husband and I, we had a good marriage, 40 years together before he passed. I want that for you and Jackson, a long and happy life." The dress was altered to fit Beatrice perfectly, with delicate lace at the collar and cuffs, pearl buttons down the back, and a flowing skirt that rustled when she walked. When she tried it on for the final fitting, Sarah clasped her hands together with delight. "You look like a princess from a storybook," she declared. Beatrice hardly recognized herself in the mirror. The gaunt, exhausted woman who had arrived in Santa Rosa 2 months ago was gone, replaced by someone healthy and happy, with color in her cheeks and light in her eyes. Love, she realized, looked good on her. Jackson, meanwhile, was dealing with his own preparations. He bought a new suit from the general store, had his boots polished, and got his hair cut so he would look presentable. Miguel teased him mercilessly about being nervous, and Tom and Danny offered conflicting advice about marriage that Jackson largely ignored. "Just love her and treat her right," Miguel finally said, serious for once. "That is all that matters." "I plan to," Jackson replied. "For the rest of my life." The wedding was set for Saturday, a week after the proposal. The whole town seemed to know about it, thanks to Mrs. Chen's network, and well-wishers stopped Jackson on the street to offer congratulations. Judge Henderson agreed to perform the ceremony, and Mrs. Chen volunteered her boarding house parlor as the venue. On Friday evening, Beatrice moved into town to stay with Mrs. Chen, propriety requiring she and Jackson spend their last night as unmarried people apart. He hated letting her go, even for one night, but he understood the necessity. "Tomorrow," he promised as he helped her down from the wagon, "tomorrow you become my wife and I will never let you out of my sight again." "Tomorrow," she agreed, kissing him softly. "I love you, Jack. I love you too, Bea, more than I ever thought possible." He rode back to the ranch alone, the house feeling empty without her presence, and spent a restless night imagining the life they would build together. Saturday dawned clear and beautiful, the kind of perfect winter day that felt like a blessing. Jackson dressed carefully in his new suit, his hands fumbling with the tie until Miguel took pity on him and tied it properly. "You look good, boss," Danny said, grinning. "Almost civilized." "Almost," Tom agreed. "Miss Vance is a miracle worker." They rode into town together, the ranch hands serving as Jackson's attendants, and arrived at the boarding house to find it transformed. Mrs. Chen had decorated the parlor with winter greenery and white ribbons, had arranged chairs for the guests, had created something beautiful from simple materials. The townspeople began to arrive, more than Jackson had expected. Shopkeepers and ranchers, families and individuals, all coming to witness the marriage and offer their support. It was humbling to see how much goodwill existed for both him and Beatrice. Judge Henderson arrived, official and solemn in his black coat, and took his place at the front of the room. Jackson stood beside him, his heart pounding so hard he thought everyone must be able to hear it. Miguel, Tom, and Danny stood behind him, and Sarah Chen stood opposite, ready to serve as Beatrice's attendant. Then the door opened, and Beatrice appeared on Mrs. Chen's arm, and Jackson forgot how to breathe. She was radiant in the cream silk dress, her dark blonde hair arranged in soft curls with white flowers tucked in, her green eyes locked on his with an expression of pure love and joy. She moved toward him with graceful steps, and he found himself moving too, meeting her halfway because he could not wait, could not stand the distance between them. Mrs. Chen placed Beatrice's hand in Jackson's with a knowing smile, then stepped back to join the guests. "Dearly beloved," Judge Henderson began, his deep voice filling the parlor, We are gathered here today to witness the joining of Jackson Irons and Beatrice Vance in holy matrimony." Jackson barely heard the words. He was too focused on Beatrice, on the way she smiled at him, on the soft pressure of her hand in his. This was real, this was happening, and in a few minutes she would be his wife. The ceremony was simple and traditional. They spoke their vows clearly, Jackson promising to love, honor, and cherish Beatrice for all his days, Beatrice promising the same to him. There was no ring. Jackson had not had time to order one, but it did not matter. The words were what mattered, the commitment they were making before God and community. "By the power vested in me by the New Mexico Territory," Judge Henderson concluded, "I now pronounce you husband and wife. Mr. Irons, you may kiss your bride." Jackson cupped Beatrice's face in his hands and kissed her with all the love in his heart, not caring who was watching, not caring about anything except this moment, this woman, this incredible gift he had been given. When they broke apart, the room erupted in applause and cheers. "Ladies and gentlemen," the judge announced with a rare smile, "I present to you Mr. and Mrs. Jackson Irons." The celebration afterward was joyful and heartfelt. Mrs. Chen had prepared a feast, and the parlor filled with laughter and music as people congratulated the newlyweds. Curtis Vance, Jackson noted with satisfaction, was nowhere to be seen. Rumor had it he had left Santa Rosa after the judge's ruling, slinking away to try his fraudulent schemes elsewhere. Good riddance. As the afternoon wore on, Jackson found himself watching his wife, still marveling at the word, as she laughed with Sarah and accepted good wishes from the townspeople. She belonged here, was part of this community in a way that had nothing to do with him. People genuinely cared about her, and she cared back. It was beautiful to witness. Finally, as the sun began to set, they said their goodbyes and climbed into Jackson's wagon for the ride home. Someone had tied old boots to the back, which clattered along the road, and Beatrice laughed at the noise. "We are really married," she said, sounding awed. "We really are, Mrs. Irons." "Mrs. Irons," she repeated. "I am never going to get tired of hearing that." The ride home felt different than all the times before. This was their home now, not just his with her as an employee, but theirs together. Their ranch, their future, their life. When they arrived, Jackson helped Beatrice down from the wagon, but instead of releasing her, he swept her up into his arms. "What are you doing?" she gasped, laughing. "Carrying my bride over the threshold," he said. "It is tradition." "Since when do you care about tradition?" "Since it gives me an excuse to hold you." He carried her up the porch steps and through the door, setting her down gently in the main room. The fire was banked low, the house quiet and peaceful. Beatrice turned to face him, suddenly shy. "I have never done this before." "Neither have I," Jackson admitted. "We will figure it out together." He took her hand and led her to the bedroom, the large one that had been his parents' and was now theirs. The awkwardness he had expected never materialized. Instead, there was tenderness and patience, gentle exploration and growing confidence. They loved each other with care and passion, learning each other's bodies the way they had learned each other's hearts, and when they finally lay tangled together in the aftermath, Beatrice curled against Jackson's chest. Both were smiling. "I love you," she murmured sleepily. "I love you too," he replied, kissing the top of her head. "My wife, my husband." They fell asleep like that, wrapped in each other, and Jackson's last thought before dreams claimed him was that he had never been happier, never been more complete. The months that followed their wedding were some of the best of Jackson's life. Beatrice thrived in her new role as wife and partner, managing the household with efficiency, while also taking on more responsibility for the ranch's business operations. Her skill with numbers proved invaluable, and under her careful management, the ranch's profits increased steadily. But it was not just the practical contributions that made Jackson grateful for his wife. It was the way she made the house feel like a home. The way she sang while cooking, her voice sweet and clear. The way she greeted him every evening when he came in from the range, standing on tiptoe to kiss him regardless of how dusty or tired he was. The way she laughed at his jokes and challenged him when she disagreed with his decisions and curled against him at night like she belonged there. Spring came to New Mexico, bringing green growth to the desert and new calves to the herd. Beatrice helped with the birthing, proving herself handy with the animals despite having no ranch experience before coming to Santa Rosa. Miguel taught her to ride, and soon she was comfortable on horseback, sometimes accompanying Jackson on rides around the property. They worked side by side, building their life together, and Jackson felt his love for her deepen every day. She was his partner in truth, not just in name, and he consulted her on every major decision regarding the ranch. In May, Beatrice came to him with news that made his heart soar. "I am with child," she said, her hand resting on her still flat stomach. "The baby should come in late December or early January." Jackson pulled her into his arms, overwhelmed with joy. "A baby! We are going to have a baby. Are you happy?" she asked, searching his face. "Happy. I am ecstatic. Terrified but ecstatic." He kissed her soundly. "You are going to be a wonderful mother. And you are going to be a wonderful father." They told the ranch hands that evening over dinner, and the men reacted with enthusiastic congratulations. Miguel, especially, seemed delighted, already planning to teach the child to ride as soon as they were old enough. As Beatrice's pregnancy progressed, Jackson became even more protective, insisting she rest more and work less. She tolerated his hovering with amused patience, reminding him that women had been having babies since the beginning of time and she was perfectly healthy. I know," he said. "But you are my wife, and that is my child, and I am allowed to worry." "You are allowed," she agreed, kissing his cheek. "Just do not smother me with your worry." He tried with varying degrees of success to give her space while still making sure she was safe and comfortable. Mrs. Chen came to visit more frequently, bringing advice and baby clothes she had saved from when Sarah was small. The whole town seemed invested in the coming baby, with well-wishers stopping by the ranch regularly with gifts and suggestions. Summer was brutally hot, and Beatrice struggled with the heat combined with her growing belly. Jackson made sure she stayed in the coolest parts of the house, brought her cool water from the well, fanned her when the air was stifling. Seeing her uncomfortable made him wish he could somehow carry the burden for her. "Only a few more months," she said one particularly hot afternoon, her hand on her rounded stomach. "And then we get to meet our son or daughter." "Do you have a preference?" Jackson asked. "Healthy is my only preference," she replied. "But I think it is a boy. He kicks like a mule." Jackson placed his hand on her belly and felt the strong kicks from within. "He is a fighter." "Like his father," Beatrice said softly. Fall brought cooler temperatures and relief for Beatrice. She was large now, moving slowly and carefully, but still insisting on doing her share of the work. Jackson finally put his foot down when he found her trying to lift a heavy pot of stew. Please, let me do the heavy work. You focus on growing our child." "I cannot just sit around doing nothing for weeks," she protested. "Then do light work. Sewing, mending, keeping the books. But no more lifting, no more standing for hours cooking. Please, love, for my peace of mind if nothing else." She relented, grumbling about overprotective husbands, but he could tell she was secretly pleased by his concern. They settled into a new routine, with Jackson and the hands taking over more of the household tasks, while Beatrice directed operations from a comfortable chair. December arrived, and with it, the anniversary of the night they had met. Jackson marked the occasion by giving Beatrice the wedding ring he had finally managed to order from a jeweler in Albuquerque, a simple gold band engraved with their initials and wedding date. "It is beautiful," she said, tears in her eyes as he slipped it onto her finger. "Thank you, Jack. You have given me everything," he replied. "The least I can do is give you a ring." She kissed him, then winced and placed a hand on her belly. "Your son is very active today. Maybe he knows it is almost time to make his appearance." 3 days later, on a cold December morning, Beatrice woke Jackson before dawn. "It is time. The pain started an hour ago and they are getting stronger." Jackson's heart jumped into his throat. "I will get Mrs. Chen." He rode into Santa Rosa faster than was strictly safe, pounding on the boarding house door until Mrs. Chen appeared in her nightgown and wrapper. He explained breathlessly, and she immediately sprang into action, gathering her supplies and waking Sarah to come help. The ride back to the ranch seemed to take forever, though Mrs. Chen kept up a stream of calm commentary designed to soothe his nerves. At the house, they found Beatrice in the bedroom, pacing slowly with one hand on her lower back, her face tight with pain. "Right on time, I see, Mrs. Chen said briskly. "Sarah, get water boiling. Jackson, you go find something useful to do. This is women's work now." "I am not leaving her," Jackson said stubbornly. "Jack, go," Beatrice said, pausing in her pacing. "Mrs. Chen knows what she is doing. I will be fine." Reluctantly, he left the bedroom, but he could not make himself go far. He paced the main room, wearing a path in the floor, while Sarah boiled water and brought clean linens to the bedroom. The hours crawled by with agonizing slowness, punctuated by occasional sounds from the bedroom that made Jackson want to break down the door. Miguel, Tom, and Danny came in for breakfast, took one look at Jackson's haggard face, and made their own breakfast, eating quickly and retreating to the barn. They had all been through births with the cattle and horses. They understood the waiting and the worry. Afternoon faded into evening and still the baby had not come. Jackson was on the verge of insisting they take Beatrice to a doctor, consequences be damned, when Mrs. Chen emerged from the bedroom. "You can come in now," she said, smiling. "Come meet your son." Jackson was through the door in seconds. Beatrice lay in the bed, exhausted and pale but smiling, holding a small bundle wrapped in blankets. He approached slowly, afraid he might be dreaming, and looked down at the tiny red face of his child. "A son," Beatrice said softly. "A healthy, strong son." "Just like I predicted." Jackson sank onto the edge of the bed, his eyes burning with tears he did not bother to hide. "He is perfect. You are perfect. I cannot believe he is real. Would you like to hold him?" She shifted the baby toward Jackson, who took the bundle with trembling hands. The baby, his son, weighed almost nothing, all tiny features and waving fists. As Jackson watched, the baby's eyes opened briefly, dark blue and unfocused, before closing again. "What should we name him?" Beatrice asked. They had discussed names over the past months but never settled on anything definite. Now, holding his son, Jackson knew exactly what felt right. "James," he said. "After my father. James Orson Irons, after both our fathers." Beatrice's eyes filled with tears. "James Orson Irons, I love it." "Hello, James. Welcome to your family." Mrs. Chen and Sarah left them alone to bond with their new son, and Jackson spent hours simply marveling at the miracle of this tiny life they had created. Eventually, exhaustion claimed Beatrice, and she fell asleep with the baby nestled beside her. Jackson sat in a chair next to the bed, watching over his family, and felt so full of love he thought his heart might burst. This was everything. This woman who had come into his life shivering on a bench, who had transformed his house into a home, who had given him love and purpose and now a son. This was the future he had always wanted but never dared hope for. As dawn light began to creep through the window, James stirred and fussed, and Jackson carefully picked him up, marveling at how natural it felt to hold his child. He carried the baby to the window and looked out at the ranch, his ranch, their ranch. "This is your home, James," he whispered. "This land, these people who love you. Someday it will all be yours, but for now, you just focus on growing strong. Your mama and I, we are going to give you the best life we can. That is a promise." The baby made a small sound, and Jackson smiled. "Yeah, I know. Big words for someone who does not even know what is happening yet, but you will understand someday. You will know how much we love you, how wanted you are." Beatrice stirred and opened her eyes, smiling at the sight of Jackson with their son. "You look good like that. Natural." "I feel natural," he admitted, bringing James back to the bed. "Like this is what I was meant to do all along." She made room for him to sit beside her, and they cuddled together, their son between them, a family complete and whole. The years that followed were full and rich, marked by both challenges and triumphs. Little James grew into a sturdy boy with his mother's green eyes and his father's stubborn determination. When he was 2, Beatrice became pregnant again, and this time she delivered a daughter they named Rose, after Jackson's mother. 2 years after Rose came another son, Samuel, and then 2 years later, twin girls, Emma and Grace. The ranch house, once so quiet and lonely, rang with the sounds of children laughing and playing, with the chaos and joy of a large family. Jackson expanded the ranch operations, buying more land and increasing the herd. Beatrice managed it all with skill and grace, somehow balancing the demands of 5 children with the responsibilities of running a ranch. Mrs. Chen remained a constant presence, visiting weekly to help with the children and offering wisdom accumulated over decades. The town of Santa Rosa grew along with their family. New businesses opened, more families arrived, and the rough frontier settlement transformed into a proper town with schools and churches and civic organizations. Jackson served on the town council, and Beatrice started a school in town, teaching children during the mornings while her own brood was cared for by a young woman they hired to help. They faced difficulties, of course. Drought years tested the ranch's resilience, cattle diseases struck the herd, and there were the normal struggles of raising children and maintaining a marriage. But through it all, Jackson and Beatrice remained partners, facing each challenge together with the same determination that had brought them through those early days. On their 10th wedding anniversary, Jackson took Beatrice into Santa Rosa for a rare dinner alone, the children staying at the ranch under Miguel's watchful eye. Over steaks and wine, they talked about the decade that had passed. "You ever regret it?" Jackson asked. "The life you could have had somewhere else, doing something different." Beatrice reached across the table and took his hand. "Never. Not once. This life, this ranch, our children, this is everything I could have wanted and more. I would not change a single moment." "Not even that first night freezing on the station bench, especially not that night," she said firmly. "Because that was the night I met you, and you gave me your coat and your name and your heart. That was the night my real life began." Jackson raised his glass. "To frozen benches and acts of kindness that change everything." "To love," Beatrice countered, clinking her glass against his. "To the love that grows from small seeds into mighty trees." They drank, and then Jackson leaned across the table to kiss his wife, still as beautiful to him at 32 as she had been at 22, maybe more so because now he knew every facet of her character, every strength and vulnerability. "I love you, B. Irons. I love you too, Jack. Always." The children grew, as children do. James showed a talent for ranching and a head for business, clearly destined to take over the operation someday. Rose had her mother's gift with numbers and her father's way with horses. Samuel was the dreamer, always with his nose in a book, already talking about becoming a lawyer or a teacher. The twins, still young, showed signs of being as different as night and day despite their identical faces. Emma bold and adventurous, Grace quiet and thoughtful. Jackson taught his sons and daughters to ride, to work the land, to treat people with respect and kindness. Beatrice taught them to read and write, to think critically, to value education and compassion. Together, they built a family culture rooted in love and integrity, in hard work and generosity. When James turned 18, Jackson and Beatrice sat down with him to discuss his future. "The ranch will be yours someday," Jackson said. "You know that, but you do not have to take it on yet. If you want to go to school, see other places, that is all right too." James shook his head. "I want to be here. This is my home and ranching is what I love. I want to learn everything you can teach me, Dad, so when the time comes, I am ready." The pride Jackson felt in that moment was overwhelming. His son, choosing the life he had built, wanting to continue the legacy. It was more than he had dared hope for. As James took on more responsibility, Jackson found himself able to step back slightly, to spend more time with the younger children, to take Beatrice on trips to Albuquerque and Santa Fe, rekindling the romance that had never really faded but sometimes got buried under the demands of daily life. On one such trip, as they walked through the plaza in Santa Fe, Beatrice stopped suddenly and pointed. "Look, Jack, that is the bench where we had our first real conversation about the future. Do you remember, when you proposed?" He looked at the bench, then at his wife. "That was not in Santa Fe, love. That was on our porch in Santa Rosa." "Was it?" She laughed. "You are right, of course. I suppose all benches are starting to look the same." "Not to me. I will never forget that first bench, the one outside the station where I found you. That bench changed my life." "It changed both our lives," she corrected. "For the better." They continued their walk hand in hand, and Jackson marveled at the journey they had taken. From that cold December night to this warm summer day, from strangers to lovers to partners to parents. It had not always been easy, but it had always been worth it. The years continued to pass, each one bringing new joys and new challenges. Rose fell in love with a young doctor who came to Santa Rosa, and her wedding was a grand affair that brought the whole town together. Samuel went off to university in the East, fulfilling his dreams of higher education. The twins grew into young women, different as could be but fiercely loyal to each other. Jackson and Beatrice grew older together, their hair graying, their bodies showing the wear of hard work and full lives. But their love never diminished. If anything, it deepened, becoming richer and more complex with each passing year. On a cold December evening, 30 years after that fateful night at the station, Jackson and Beatrice sat on their porch wrapped in blankets, watching the sunset paint the desert in shades of gold and crimson. James now ran the day-to-day operations of the ranch, living in the bunkhouse that had been converted into a proper house with his wife and young children. The main house belonged to Jackson and Beatrice, quieter now but still filled with love. 30 years, Beatrice said softly. "Can you believe it has been 30 years since you gave me your coat?" "Best decision I ever made," Jackson replied, pulling her closer. "You were shivering on that bench, looking so lost and alone, and something in me just knew I had to help you. I had no idea you would become my entire world." "I was terrified that night," she admitted. "I thought I had reached the end of my road, that there was nowhere left to go, and then you appeared, like an answer to a prayer I had not even known to say." "We saved each other," Jackson said. "You saved me from loneliness, from a half-life." You gave me purpose and joy and a family. Everything good in my life stems from that night." She turned to look at him, her green eyes still bright despite the years. "I love you, Jackson Irons. I have loved you from the moment you draped that coat over my shoulders and introduced yourself. I will love you until my last breath and beyond. And I love you, Beatrice Irons. You are my heart, my home, my everything." They kissed as the sun sank below the horizon, two people who had found each other against all odds and built a life more beautiful than either had dared imagine. Around them, the ranch hummed with life. Grandchildren playing in the barn, cattle lowing in the distance, the windmill turning in the evening breeze. This was their legacy, built from an act of kindness on a cold night. Built from a coat and a name freely given. Built from love that started as a spark and grew into a flame that would burn for generations. As stars began to appear in the darkening sky, Jackson and Beatrice remained on the porch, wrapped in each other's arms, grateful for every moment they had been given, for the chance encounter that had changed everything. The bench outside the station was long gone, replaced years ago when the railroad expanded. But it lived on in their memories, a symbol of beginnings and possibilities, of the way a single moment of compassion could alter the course of two lives forever. And in the warm glow of the house behind them, in the laughter of their grandchildren, in the prosperous ranch spread out under the new Mexican sky, the legacy of that moment continued, a testament to the power of kindness and the enduring strength of love. They had built something beautiful together, something that would outlast them both. And as they sat there in the gathering dark, they knew with absolute certainty that they had lived well, loved deeply, and left the world better than they found it. It was enough. It was more than enough. It was everything.